Frangillo, the Westlaw Account Manager at NESL. Thank you for joining me today to talk a little bit about the motion to compel issue that you've been assigned to research regarding compelling the government to grant use immunity in U.S. district courts in California. Two ways of approaching research. You should already be aware of this. There is the known document approach and the descriptive word approach. Based on the packet you received, we will be able to employ both approaches. First and foremost, if you were given a head start, i.e., you are pointed to potentially relevant documents, you do always want to start there, because oftentimes you can mine all of the information you need without ever having to resort to running a word search. Two examples of that I'm displaying on the screen. Both the immunity statute, 18 U.S.C.A. 6002, and a case by the name of U.S. v. Alessio, 528 Fed 2nd 1079, were referenced in your packet. I'm going to find both of them. Remember, anytime you need to find multiple documents on Westlaw, you can do that by simply separating them with a semicolon. And these are going to be really relevant, so I know already that I'm going to select both and save them to my trial brief immunity folder. If you haven't created one, I would recommend doing so, because there are some safety nets we're going to talk about that folders provide to you. A little bit later on, we'll talk about that. All right, so let's get into the documents. First, let's start with the case, Alessio. Keep in mind that when you retrieve cases on Westlaw, you always want to go through the head notes. Head notes provide us with a number of important points of information. Number one, they give me an ability to scan and isolate the precise points of law that are most relevant for me. And by the way, you can toggle between the outline view or the compressed view in case you were doing this on your own and wanted to do that. So by scanning these 9 issues, these 9 head notes, I'm able to isolate that at least issue number 4 looks relevant to what you've been assigned. I mean, this, by reading the summary that the editors have provided, this looks like it's directly on point. So head notes allow me to extract a summary of each issue, number 1. Every head note from every case has been placed somewhere in that West topic and key number system, number 2. And from each head note, I know exactly how many cases analyzed, supported, followed your case for this precise point of law, number 3. You'll see that listed here. So, focusing on head note number 4. I read this summary, it looks really good. Keep in mind, if I wanted to quote language from this case, I could toggle into the opinion and see exactly what the court said at that precise point in the case. A couple of other features I wanted to point out that are new to you since last semester. One, when you are scrolling through an opinion, there will be an outline on the left-hand side of the screen. And I think this is really, really important, and it's going to save you some embarrassment in the sense that if this case had a concurring or dissenting portion, we would be able to identify and hence not rely on those parts of the opinion. Again, if this case had one. The other thing that I think that's even more important is that Westlaw is now embedding key cite flags within the opinion. So any of the authorities that your case relied upon, as you're reading the opinion, if those authorities, whether they are cases, statutes, or regs, if those authorities had negative references to them, we're going to embed those flags within the case itself. So now there really is no excuse for you to cite parts of a case that are no longer good, because you can clearly see, for example, in this part of the opinion, the Crispino case now has a red flag. I would not want to quote Alessio for this particular part without investigating why that case had a red flag. All right, let's go back to the head note itself. As I said, this really is the issue that you've been assigned to research. This particular point of law has been classified to the topic constitutional law, subtopic due process, until we get down to that last particular entry, which is immunity and privilege. This is such a precise and good topic and key number for your issue, 92K4692, that I would strongly recommend running a search on that precise point of law, because when you do, you'll notice that we ended up getting 36 cases or 36 head notes in the Ninth Circuit on this particular issue. And I can tell you from scrolling through this list that a lot of these cases are going to come into play for you when researching this particular point of law. The other thing that's really nice about doing a topic and key number search, not only do we get every case classified to that precise point of law, and again, this is something that experts have done for us to save us some heartache and to save us some work, to make us more efficient as researchers. But not only do they list every single one of them, we can actually tell Westlaw, look, it's nice that you're giving us every one. I want to get the seminal case in this jurisdiction on the point of law, constitutional law, subtopic, witnesses, immunity, and privilege. Well, I can do that by simply selecting sort by most cited. And if I were in this jurisdiction and I were citing this issue and I hadn't previously been pointed to Alessio, I would now know that Alessio is the seminal case in the Ninth Circuit on this issue. It's been cited 60 times. That's the one I'm going to lead with when writing a brief or motion or memo on this particular point of law. All right, let's use history to go back to the aforementioned Alessio case. Another thing that I wanted to point out that's going to make you a better researcher. As I said, we know Alessio is directly on point with the issue you've been assigned to research. We already ran a topic and key number search to get cases in the Ninth Circuit classified to that precise point of law. What if I wanted to get other cases now that analyzed and followed Alessio? Can I do that? And the answer is yes. What you would do is utilize the citing references feature on Westlaw. And when you do that, and right now I'm hovering over that particular link, you'll notice that there are 350 documents total that have analyzed our case. And if we wanted to look at secondary sources, we certainly could. But what I'm interested right now are the 99 cases. And more precisely, I don't want every case that may be cited to Alessio for the issues that I'm not concerned with. I don't really care about the indictment issues or the criminal law issues or the attorney general issues. I only want cases that cited to Alessio for that constitutional law issue we were just looking at, issue number 4. Well, you know, I could go in this way and use the filters to narrow it down, or here's the shortcut on Westlaw. This is what I talked about earlier. I know that there are 60 cases that cited to Alessio for this precise issue. So of the 99 cases, the vast majority of them cited to Alessio for this point of law. I can click that link, and in one click, Westlaw will collect all 60 of those cases and let me start there. Now, if you are obviously interested in Ninth Circuit cases, once we get our result, and I'm not going to do this for today just to save some time, you could have narrowed to just the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decisions. That would be a real nice starting point for you. And again, I haven't done a word search yet. I've retrieved a lot of really good content just based off of that particular case. Let's take a look at that immunity statute, 18 USCA 6002. This again also mentioned in your particular packet. I don't have time to really go into detail on the various parts of a statute that are going to be really, really important when you're out there practicing. I'm going to just list them quickly. When you're working with statutes on Westlaw, you always want to look for 4 bits of information. 1, am I viewing the precise version of the statute that applies to my client's cause of action? In other words, when my client was arrested and charged under this particular statute, when did the cause of action accrue? That's going to be really important because Westlaw is the only system that actually gives you an ability to get other versions of statutes that were in play when the cause of action accrued. Now, where would that information be? Right here underneath the caption of the statute. If this statute had changed in the last 21 years, we'd be able to go back and get prior versions. You don't have to do that here. It hasn't changed in over 25 years, so we're looking at the proper version. 2, is this statute still valid? i.e., does it have a red flag? If you don't see any flags, it means there are no negative references. The third item that is important, I know I'm in the right area, but this might not be the precise statute that best answers my question. So whenever you are pointed to a statute or reg, it's always a good idea to click on the table of contents and look at the surrounding sections. And by the way, for what you were researching, 6003 is going to be as important as 6002. So let's use the table of contents right now to jump into that particular statute. The fourth item that is crucial, and this is something that you're going to need to rely upon for researching this issue. We could all read this statute and dispute how it applies to our client's situation, but what we think isn't as important as what courts have said. So one of the things that you will always want to do when looking at statutes is rely on the notes of decisions. Notes of decisions are going to be curated cases, cases that editors read and placed to the notes of decisions because they thought those cases substantially analyzed your statute. So it's a great starting point for you. And by the way, the other link that is really relevant for you, if you needed background on this issue, i.e., you needed secondary sources, again, under context and analysis, all of this information is curated. The editors are providing us with some really good secondary sources and treatises if we needed that background. More on secondary sources a little bit later on, but what I would recommend that you do here, jump into the notes of decisions, and we can take a look at the 298 cases that have been placed here by the editors. Now, the other time-saving feature they give us, whenever they place cases to the notes of decisions, you will always see a subject matter index. This makes it a lot easier for us to identify cases that deal with the issue that we are researching. For example, I would probably want to take a look at, under the immunity topic, defense witnesses. That's going to be a subtopic that is certainly going to be relevant. So I can, from this list, select defense witnesses, and here are a list of highly relevant cases that discuss this statute in conjunction with the topic defense witnesses. Okay, so good starting point using those two documents that were provided in your student packet. As I said earlier, obviously you will have to run a word search, and based on my reading of the packet, I just extracted some of these terms that you see on the screen here. So step 1, type your issue. Step 2, select your jurisdiction. We could limit to the Ninth Circuit here. I could also just tell Westlaw, I want California materials and I want to include related federal. That's going to give us U.S. District Court materials from California, as well as Court of Appeals and any Supreme Court materials that apply. So step 2, select your jurisdiction. Step 3, run the search. And when you get your results, I have my password defaulted to immediately take me into secondary sources. This is something that you should always do as a matter of course. You can use this link to set the default so that whenever you run a word search like this, it dumps you into secondary sources first. And the reason you're going to start there is that, look, I don't know much about this issue. I want to get some background on the cause of action I've been asked to research, number 1. And number 2, every secondary source is going to point me to the primary sources that control, to the cases and or statutes and regulations that apply to the issue I've been assigned to research. Another shortcut or efficiency feature you should be aware of, make sure your detail level is set to most. Some of you might have your detail level set to less or more. By having it set to most, I can quickly and efficiently go through this list looking for potentially good secondary sources. Now, when I do that, another thing that I do want you to be aware of when looking at secondary sources, a lot of times you're going to get some academic law reviews that, probably not something that you're going to be using when you're out there practicing. I'm a big fan of using filters for secondary sources. So if you wanted to knock out the academic law reviews, if I only wanted to focus on maybe the federal materials and the California materials, I can just select those materials, apply my filter, and it will knock it down from 90 something to the 24 federal and or California based secondary sources. This really should be the starting point for you. And when we do this, you'll notice that, look, just by reading these blurbs here, we get some real good secondary sources that are going to provide us with a great starting point, a great understanding of this specific issue. Defense witnesses, prosecution misconduct, points and authorities. Okay, and you'll notice the standard for Straub is here. Links to the primary sources. Lord is another case that you're going to need to deal with. This is just a real great way of getting that understanding and core group of documents that you need. And I'm not saying you wouldn't eventually make your way into cases. I'm just saying you wouldn't start with cases. Now that I've read these secondary sources, and maybe I've saved a couple of these to my folders here. Now I'm ready to maybe take a look at these cases. Now, 2 final tips that I think of as safety nets. And this is where really Westlaw has your back unlike no other service. When you were researching and interacting with documents on Westlaw, you're going to see a research recommendations banner pop up from time to time. This, as I said, is a safety net. It's designed to make sure that, hey, Westlaw sees that you are looking at this issue or these issues based on the documents you're interacting with. It's going to tell you, based on what you're interacting with, we're going to recommend potentially additional cases, statutes, and secondary sources on this issue so that you can make sure you got everything that you need. Look at this. Good treatise on defense witness immunity. We didn't look at that yet. I probably should take a look at that. Second safety net that Westlaw provides you is through folders. And this is why it is crucial that you folder everything that you find on Westlaw. When I click folders, it gives me an ability to view my 5 most recent folders and the materials within each. What I would like you to do is click View All. It takes you to your folder tree where, if we scroll down to the trial brief immunity issue we are researching, this is the other really cool feature. When you add documents to folders, Westlaw is taking a look at the documents you've added to the folders, and it's looking for patterns. It's looking for issues that are common to those documents, and it's going to suggest additional documents. It's going to break down the issues and suggest and recommend additional documents based on the different issues. So look at issue number 1, right of defendant in criminal proceeding to have immunity from prosecution granted to defense witness. It's recommending 22 documents that I haven't either read or foldered. Now, when I click that link, you'll see 10 of them are cases, 2 are statutes, 10 are secondary sources. Lord, big case, you're going to need to read that, and a few others. Wilkes, these are cases I have not added to the folder, and I might want to either read and or add them at this point. Okay, hope this is helpful. My notes are going to be posted on Twin. If you have questions about this, I'm typing my email address at the top of the screen, mark.frangillo@tr.com. Thank you, and have a good day.